My name's Ethan, and for most of my marriage, I thought I was the kind of man who didn't need control to feel at peace. I worked hard, came home tired, and believed that love meant compromise, that you bend a little when your partner needs space. But what I didn't realize was that I wasn't bending anymore. I was breaking. It started with small things. Emily would joke with her friends about how Ethan doesn't make a single decision without me. She'd laugh, and everyone else would laugh with her. I'd smile, pretending it didn't sting. At first, I told myself it was harmless humor, just her way of showing she ran a tight ship. But somewhere between her jokes and my silence, the balance shifted. The ship stopped belonging to both of us. When we first met, she loved that I was calm, steady, grounded. "You're the anchor," she used to say. I didn't realize anchors don't move, they sink. Over time, my words started carrying less weight in our home. If I suggested a restaurant, she'd roll her eyes and say, "We always do what you want." Then she'd choose something else. If I bought something small for myself, a new jacket, a watch, even a book, she'd comment on how we needed to budget better. Yet somehow her spa days and online orders never counted as indulgence. The real shift came when she got promoted at work. She deserved it. She's smart, driven, confident. But with that new confidence came something darker. Control wasn't enough. She needed everyone to see she had it. At dinners with friends, she'd talk about how Ethan's so easygoing. He just lets me run the show. Sometimes, she'd even joke that I was trained. Everyone laughed. I did too, but each time something in me dimmed. I started noticing her tone changing when we were alone. It wasn't arguments, it was dismissals. I'd speak, and she'd respond with silence, like my words didn't deserve an answer. If I made a decision, she'd undo it just to prove she could. It wasn't about what was right, it was about who decided. One night, after one of those dinner parties, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She said, "It's cute, honestly. He just does whatever I say. I swear, it's like having a second pair of hands that doesn't argue." Then she laughed. That carefree, careless kind of laugh that slices through a person when they realize they've become someone's punchline. I didn't confront her. Instead, something inside me went completely still. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, it comes from understanding. From that night on, I stopped reacting. I didn't fight, didn't defend myself. I simply stopped handing her the levers she loved pulling. If she wanted to make a decision, I let her, but I stopped being affected by it. If she wanted control over money, I quietly redirected my paycheck into my personal account under a separate agreement. I paid bills, contributed what was fair, but the rest, it was mine again. She didn't notice at first. She was too busy enjoying her illusion of authority. But slowly, things began to shift. I stopped asking for permission, not in words, but in energy. If she said, "Don't buy that," I'd nod. Then buy it anyway. If she mocked my choices, I stopped explaining them. I didn't fight for freedom, I acted free. The strangest thing about taking back your power is how quiet it feels. There's no grand confrontation, no cinematic explosion. Just the subtle realization that you no longer owe anyone the performance of obedience. Weeks passed, and Emily started to sense something had changed. She'd ask, "Why are you so distant lately?" I'd shrug. "I'm fine." She'd press, "You used to talk to me about everything." I didn't say what I was thinking, that I used to talk because I believed she was listening. The more she tried to test her control, the less reaction she got. One morning, she said, "You didn't tell me you transferred your car insurance to your own name." I said, "Didn't think it mattered." Her voice rose. "Everything you do matters, Ethan. We're a team." I just smiled and said, "That's what I used to think." It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. She had built an entire identity around being the one in charge, and suddenly her influence wasn't landing anymore. The puppet strings were cut, but I wasn't walking away, I was just standing still. And for her, that stillness was unbearable. The night it all came to a head, she stood in the kitchen, hands on her hips, saying, "You've changed. You're not the same man I married." I looked at her and replied, "No, Emily, I'm the same man. I just stopped letting you edit the parts you didn't like." Her face froze. a mixture of confusion and panic. It wasn't anger she felt. It was the dawning realization that her control had evaporated. Quietly, completely, without warning. After that night, the silence between us became its own language. She kept trying to fill it with demands, guilt, questions, but nothing worked anymore. It wasn't that I ignored her. I just didn't engage in the games that had once drained me. When she realized her usual tone didn't trigger me, she tried something new, kindness. She started cooking again, asking about my day, offering small gestures of affection. But every word felt rehearsed, like she was following a script she didn't believe in. I didn't reject her efforts. I simply didn't need them, because when a man learns to live without control, he doesn't crave approval anymore, he craves peace. A few weeks later, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face pale. "Why didn't you tell me you opened a separate account?" she asked quietly. I said, "Because every decision I made before this one required an explanation. This one didn't." She blinked at me, trying to process it. "So what, you're just pulling away? Is that it? After everything?" "No," I said. "I'm just done being managed." She started crying then. Real tears, not manipulation, not theatrics. It's strange how the moment someone loses control, they suddenly see you clearly for the first time. She said, "I didn't mean to make you feel small. I just like things done a certain way." I nodded. "I know. You like control. I used to think love meant giving it to you." I walked to the window. The evening light stretched long across the floor. Quiet, unassuming, just like the peace I'd been waiting for. "I kept thinking," I continued, "that if I let you steer, you'd trust that I was still in the car. But you didn't. You just kept pushing the pedal." She didn't respond. I think she realized that somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a participant in her performance. The following days were strange. She stopped joking about me in front of her friends. She stopped teasing, stopped ordering me around. But it was too late. The dynamic had already dissolved. Control, once broken, can't be glued back together. Not because the power is gone, but because the illusion is. I wasn't cruel. I didn't yell, didn't punish. I simply lived like a man who remembered his own name. I made choices. I smiled more. I started reading again. I reconnected with old friends, the ones she didn't like because they encouraged bad habits, which really just meant independence. One of them, Mike, looked at me across the table one night and said, "You look lighter, man, like you finally exhaled." I laughed. Maybe I did. The truth is, it wasn't Emily's fault entirely. I let it happen. I gave her the control she bragged about. I confused peace with submission and understanding with silence. But once I understood the difference, I couldn't go back. A few months later, she brought up therapy. I agreed. I had no anger left. I was open to conversation. But therapy doesn't fix what's already expired. It just clarifies the expiration date. The counselor asked her, "Why do you think you need control in this relationship?" She said, "Because if I don't, he won't do anything." I smiled and said, "You mean he won't do what you want?" The counselor looked at both of us for a long moment. That silence said everything words couldn't. By the end of that year, Emily asked for space. I gave it gladly. She thought it was temporary. But when she finally called one evening, saying, "Can we talk? I miss how it used to be," I told her the truth. "It's not that I don't care," I said. "It's that I'm finally free from proving that I do." There wasn't an argument. Just the sound of her breathing on the other end, slow, resigned, almost understanding. She hung up. People assume control is taken by force. It isn't. It's surrendered quietly, piece by piece, through 1,000 small hesitations. The real power isn't in taking it back loudly. It's in realizing you never needed permission to have it in the first place. Sometimes freedom doesn't come from walking out. It comes from standing still and letting the other person walk away, realizing they were never holding you, just holding your compliance. Months later, I heard from a mutual friend that she'd been telling people how Ethan just changed one day. He became cold. I smiled when I heard that, because cold isn't the word. The right word is clear. Clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't fight. It doesn't need revenge. It just says, you can't control someone who's already chosen peace. And that's the quiet victory she never saw coming.